and a consultation with a person you call a caretaker, I believe. Is that correct?
Right, I consulted with 2 of the caretakers of the birds.
Okay. By phone, remotely? Is it a
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Have you yourself ever physically examined either of these 2 birds?
No, I have not.
Okay. Defendant Paul testified earlier that one of these birds is alive and healthy today with a bright red comb. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I mean, he survived thanks to the great care that he got from his caretakers.
So you say things like IPV are highly contagious. I believe you said 100%. Is that right?
Yes, that's what's reported in the literature, 100% morbidity.
100% morbidity. So the truck that these 2 birds were on had 5,000 birds. So would it be your opinion that every bird had that on that truck?
You know, I don't have any specific knowledge about the other birds on the truck.
Okay, well, in your expert opinion, you said it had 100% morbidity. Is that 100% transmissibility as well?
Yes, I mean, I do have concerns, but I don't know.
So if it's 100% transmissible, if one bird has it, then you would expect all birds to have it.
Yeah, and it depends on the timeline, but yes.
Okay. The organization that you run, is it Happy Hen Ranch? Is that the name of it?
Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary,
And does that organization involve itself in any animal activism at all?
The organization itself, no.
So you said the organization itself, why did you specify it that way?
Because the organization, Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary, does not
Well, let me ask you another
not
way.
do activism.
You said the organization itself, no, rather than just saying no. I'm asking why you had to limit it to just the organization itself.
Yeah, because, I mean, people that participate in the organization have attended protests and things.
Okay.
So I was just trying to be accurate.
And I appreciate that. That's all we want here is the truth and the accuracy. You yourself, have you had any involvement with Direct Action Everywhere?
I mean, I'm testifying here today, and this is a Direct Action Everywhere case.
You've testified in 8 cases, you said?
I've been an expert witness on 8 cases.
And how many of those cases were you summoned by Direct Action Everywhere or somebody involved with Direct Action Everywhere?
Maybe 5?
What were the other 3? Who asked you to testify in the other 3?
Your Honor, objection, relevance?
Overruled.
Yeah, so I don't specifically have permission from other organizations to reveal their identity,
Well, let me ask you another.
so I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Let me ask you another way. What type of cases were those other 3? Were they cases where somebody was charged with committing some sort of crime against property or commercial farm?
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point if we can approach.
Okay, well, how's that? The objection sustained in the form it is questioning which it is asked.
All right, well, I'll ask you another one. Were you asked to testify in that case by the prosecution or the defense?
So that's not necessarily a clear-cut question. So these other cases are more civil cases,
Okay.
not criminal cases.
So in the other cases, then, were you asked to testify on behalf of a commercial farm interest?
No.
Thank you very much. So 5 of your cases involved Direct Action Everywhere?
Correct.
And did any of these cases involve the taking of chickens?
Your Honor, I'm going to object and again ask to approach.
I'll withdraw the question. I can move
All
on.
right.
Move to strike.
The question strings.
So, once again, you're aware that one of these 2 chickens did survive and reportedly by the defense is alive today?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions.
All right. Can we redirect? Actually, any cross by co-counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. Good morning.
So as I understand your opinion, chickens in this condition typically end up in a landfill.
That would be the most likely thing that would happen.
Well, couldn't at least the feathers, as a veterinarian, would you authorize someone to at least harvest the feathers from these types of chickens?
Yeah, that's a good question as to whether any of the parts of the chickens could be salvaged. I would find that extremely problematic because then you're looking at a situation where you would have these birds presumably inside of a slaughtering plant, and you would have workers coming into really direct contact with the tissues of the bird, you know, pulling out the feathers. It's a very messy thing. And then, I mean, these birds are infected with diseases that could harm humans. And then also get the other birds in the facility contaminated with these diseases and possibly spread to grocery store chicken, you know, for example. So I really wouldn't recommend that. And honestly, ideally, I would recommend just incinerating their bodies just to be safe.
So if you were consulted by someone who had, whether it's a person or a business, who had chickens in this condition, and they wanted to harvest the feathers prior to incinerating them or putting them in a landfill, you would not even approve that?
No, I would say that's way too big of a public health risk.
Thank you.
Mr. John, redirect.
Yeah, just a few questions. First, I think the prosecution asked you about your testimony on behalf of animal advocates. And, you know, we disclosed that in our initial questioning that you testified on behalf of animal advocates. You've also testified after being called by governmental bodies, correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell me more about that? The legislative bodies, judicial bodies?
Yeah, I testified regarding Proposition 2. It was a farm animal legislation in the state of California involving providing mainly chickens with a little bit different housing and all of the issues associated with that, disease issues.
Who were you called to testify by?
So it was Abel Maldonado. He was a state senator at the time, and so it was the California State Agriculture Committee that called the hearing.
And so it wasn't an animal advocate called you to testify?
No.
Okay. No further questions, John.
All right. Doctor, the jury has a question. Are the chickens able to be consumed by humans after they are treated?
So that's a detailed answer. In theory, it could be possible, but the short answer is no, because it would require so much follow-up testing to be sure that they were clear of the disease. And in addition, when you put an animal on antibiotics and they're going to be eaten by humans, there's a withdrawal period for that antibiotic because we don't want human consumers to be inadvertently eating antibiotics that might make them sick. And so every antibiotic and every specific animal species has different withdrawal has different withdrawal times for that antibiotic and species. And so, you would have to wait until the chicken had gone through that withdrawal period and they were clear of the drug in their system, and then you'd have to do really serious testing to be sure that they no longer had the infectious diseases that they're infected with. And that would be extremely expensive. I mean, a lot of people don't even do that with their, dogs or cats. They treat them with antibiotics and they hope that the infection is cleared, but they don't go back and retest.
All right. There's a second question that the jury had asked. Ladies and gentlemen, the court is not going to ask this question of the witness for legal reasons. Okay. Thank you, doctor. May the witness be excused?
Just a couple of questions, just. a
You want to follow up on the
Yes,
last
sir.
point? Okay.
Actually, not on the last one, on what on the redirect you just said, it's a couple.
Okay.
So you testified before the state legislature for Proposition 2?
It was a hearing that was conducted in San Luis Obispo, not in the, but yeah, it was the state assembly legislative committee for the agriculture committee.
And it was about Proposition 2?
Yes.
And it was about how to change the law through that process?
It was just, so the state senators wanted to gather more information from experts so that they really understood the issue.
Did Proposition 2 ultimately pass?
It did.
So that wasn't testimony in a courtroom regarding a criminal case, that was testimony regarding legislation?
Correct, it was a legislative hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No further questions.
All right. Any question? Any further? Okay. May the witness be excused?
Your Honor, I'd just like to reserve calling this witness on server rebuttal, as we
Okay.
previously discussed.
All right.
So, and,
Okay,
and
thank you, ma'am. You may step down this time, but you are not released from the subpoena yet. Okay, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a lunch recess at this point. We'll resume at 1:30. Remember the court's admonition not to form opinions at this point. We're not done with the evidence base yet. Do not conduct any research, talk to anybody involved in this case, counsel, anybody, or other people who are not involved in this case. Do not talk about them. Talk to them. Okay, and we'll resume at 1:30. Okay.
Mr. Chung asked Ms. Yamada the question of value. Prosecution objected. It was sustained. So at this point, I don't think there's anything that Mr. Sutton's particularized knowledge rebuts in any testimony we've presented, because we haven't been able to present any value testimony that his would go directly against. And I would just reiterate, like, this was a sanction. And if the prosecution is simply allowed to just call their witness to testify as he would have at the very beginning, at the end of this trial, that in some weird way actually confers on him a benefit. You know, one of the more recent witnesses would be the prosecution witness. But I think ultimately his testimony would have to be narrowly tailored to rebut specific testimony that we presented. And since we weren't allowed to present any evidence of dollars and cents in value, which is what Mr. Sutton would testify to, because he's not a veterinarian, he can't speak to the animal's health. He's, my understanding, just talking about sort of the price evaluation. We didn't present any testimony related to that. We tried to, but because of the prosecution's objections, we couldn't. So I don't know what he's here to rebut. And if he's not here to rebut anything, he can't testify consistent with the court's sanction for the prosecution for failing to follow the basic discovery rules.
All right, Mr. Colby.
Your Honor, both of the defendants testified as to their motives for taking the chickens, including the fact that they both believed these chickens were of no value to Foster Farms. That is specifically on point here with the next witness's testimony, and it should be allowed. I want to rehash the late discovery thing. It was provided immediately. There was no late discovery. I know the court ruled inadmissible in the case in chief, but the indication was admissible in rebuttal, and that's clearly admissible at this point, so we'd have to call him as our witness.
What is he going to testify to? Is he going to testify to economic dollar value? Is he just going to testify to rendering practices?
He's going to testify to two areas, we believe. He will testify to different ways in which chickens are processed that are valuable to the company, and whether or not a chicken that might show signs of illness or injury is still valuable to the company in any way. Those are the two general areas.
Okay.
Your Honor, just say in response, what the prosecution just said, that we provided evidence of motive, is correct. But this witness is not being asked to rebut our evidence of motive that was presented. And those are your words, not mine. They're asking for an entirely new body of evidence regarding rendering credits, accounting. This is an expert, a vice president of operational and strategic accounting. There was no evidence of accounting presented whatsoever in the defense. And as my co-counsel mentioned, every time we attempted to even go close in that direction, the prosecution objected, the objection was sustained, there was no evidence or testimony presented on this question. So I would join in co-defendant's counsel in objecting to Mr. Sutton's testimony at this point.
All right, submitted on the issue.
Yes, sir.
The defense have, entire line of, I think one of the defense is that these animals have no value in the sense that they are not cannot be used for human consumption as well as other products for other animal consumption. Dr. Rosenberg testified that in her opinion, these animals should have been called and or quarantined or treated at the ranch, but most likely the practice is the economic way to handle that is to kill them and bury them at the ranch, right? I think and from that, the argument I think is that, you know, these 2 chickens should have been killed and should have been buried at the ranch and therefore has no value to foster farms. Mr. Sutton can rebut that, and can testify as to, if anything, they would have done differently. But I think it is true that for him to testify to some economic value in terms of dollar number, that goes beyond what the court allowed and what the court excluded that. And so he is permitted to testify to rebut this witness's testimony.
Yeah,
Right.
Judge, I just wanted to know, I think both witnesses are in the courtroom. Should they be sequestered for the purpose of this argument? I'm sorry.
Your Honor, we have no objection.
Okay,
I think
I-
this is Mr. Sutton. Dr. Rosenberg is also here. I just wanted to flag that for Your Honor's attention, in case you wanted to ask.
okay, they're already here, they already heard it. Any further arguments?
No, Your Honor.
Okay,
No, thank you.
all right. And, but Dr. Rosenberg is gonna be excluded to the extent that she might be recalled.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay. All right, are we ready for the jury to come back in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, we're back on telling people this is Alexandra Paul and Alicia Santurio, all jurors plus 2 alternates are present, counsel and the defendant present. All right, Mr. Sean, do the defense have any other witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Defense for Ms. Paul rests. Mr. Caraway?
We rest as well.
Right, okay. All right, defense for Ms. Santurio also rests. If people have any rebuttal witnesses,
We do, Your Honor.
okay, you may call your rebuttal witness.
We will call Shane Sutton to the stand.
All right, Mr. Sutton, please take this stand.
By the blue chair, and remain standing and face the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence you shall give in this matter now before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, sir, would you state your full name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Eric Shane Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N.
Thank you. Mr. Elwell?
And what's your occupation?
I'm the Vice President of Operational and Strategic Accounting at Foster Farms.
What is Foster's Farms business?
We're in the business of processing chicken and turkeys for food for the United States.
Does Foster's Farm use the full chicken for food and products?
Yes.
What processes does Foster Farm use to derive food and products from your chickens?
Well, there's the typical production process for the meat for human consumption, and then we have a supplemental rendering process for all other products.
What is rendering?
Rendering is effectively taking the components of the production process that have no use, and you derive a useful material from them.
What are some of these materials that are derived from the process?
It's primarily meat meal, fat, and feta meal.
Can the rendering process be applied to chickens unfit for human consumption?
Yes.
Of these products you discussed, which of them would be applicable to a sick chicken?
All of them.
Are these supplemental products as valuable to Foster Farms?
Yes, they have value.
If a chicken comes on a truck, a Foster Farms facility and showing signs of sickness, is that's still valuable to Foster Farms?
Objection, speculation, lack of foundation.
Overruled.
Yes.
No further questions?
Cross-examination.
Mr. Sutton, do you prefer Mr. Sutton, Shane, Eric? Do you have a preference? No?
Shane's fine.
Okay. Shane, my name is Wayne Shaw. I'm counsel for one of the defendants, Alexandra Paul. I'm going to ask you just a few follow-up questions. First, first, Foster Farms cares about food safety, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, you've publicly advertised, and by you I mean the company, not you individually.
Yes, sir.
You publicly advertised that your chickens are free of, quote, injury, pain, or disease.
I don't specifically know what our position or stance has been that we've communicated publicly on that. But yes, in general.
Your Honor, my approach.
You may.
I'm going to give you a printout. You can take a look at it and familiarize yourself with it for a moment. I can also show you this on my computer if it's necessary. But I just wanted to familiarize yourself with this. Let me know when you're done.
Sir?
And does this document look familiar to you?
No, it doesn't specifically look familiar.
Does it appear to be Foster Farms' website?
I think that would be speculation on my part.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm just going to show you the Foster Farms website and show you the exact image that I shared with you. Does this appear to be Foster Farms' website? FosterFarms.com?
Yes, sir, it does.
And your understanding?
Yes, sir.
Let's click here.
Okay.
Compare this.
Yes,
Does this
sir.
appear to be a printout of the website?
Yes, sir, it does.
Again, I'll refer you to the third entry point on the second page on this document. You see that line? Freedom from injury, pain, or disease.
Yes, sir.
So just, do you think you could confirm again, does your company in fact publicly advertise that your chickens are, quote, free of injury, pain, or disease?
According to this, yes, we do.
That's because you wouldn't sell sick animals to the public.
That's correct.
Selling sick animals to consumers is in fact unlawful, isn't it?
I think the USDA inspectors at our facilities ensure that.
But it's unlawful from your understanding.
Yes,
In fact, it's unlawful to transit sick animals too, isn't it?
you're asking a question that's beyond my area of expertise.
Okay, and that's fair, because in the same website, I think you testified you're a vice president of operational strategic accounting, so your background is an accountant. On that same website and advertising, is your understanding that it's a close monitoring by staff veterinarians at Foster Farms that determines how you handle animals with disease, isn't that right?
Pardon me?
So I'm just asking to look at item 3 on the second page here. Is it fair to say your company advertises that it engages in, quote, close monitoring by staff veterinarians to ensure that animals are free from injury, pain, or disease?
Yes,
And you just said that's outside my expertise because you're not a vet, obviously.
correct.
And you wouldn't violate your vet's requirements for keeping animals and consumers safe, would you?
Me personally?
You and your personal knowledge or your knowledge of the company as an executive at the company?
No.
You would not. And that's because the veterinarians are the experts, right? You
Yes,
wouldn't trust your own judgment or my judgment over veterinarians.
correct.
You wouldn't sell an animal that a vet told you can't sell this animal.
No,
You wouldn't process, render, or transport an animal if the veterinarian told you this is against veterinary protocols or veterinary regulations.
once again, sir, you're asking questions that are outside of my area of expertise.
I'm
I'm
just saying
not
to
sure
you-
what the protocols are that
For sure.
surround the identification, communication,
I
and,
understand.
and resolution of those issues. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Let me clarify the question. I'm not asking you about the existence of protocols or regulations on transporting diseased animals. I'm asking whether you would violate a veterinarian's requirement, either under veterinary protocols or their understanding of federal or state regulations around veterinary practice. You would not violate the requirement that an animal that's diseased not be transported. Would you do that?
Me personally, or
Why
as
don't
a
you answer you personally
representative?
first as an executive?
No,
Okay, and with your company?
not that I'm aware of.
And again, that's because the veterinarians are the experts in the area, not an accountant.
Right, not the accountants.
Understood.
We have basically no position within, like I said, the processes, procedures, protocols for identifying, reporting, and resolving.
So the
these
veterinarian
things.
tells you, you can't sell this chicken, you're not gonna violate that requirement.
The veterinarian wouldn't tell me, I'm an accountant.
But the company.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. How long have you worked for Foster Farms?
I started in January 23rd of this year.
So a few months.
Yes, sir.
So you weren't around in September 2021 when the incident involved in this case unfolded?
No, sir.
You don't know what's going on in 2021 regarding animal health or Foster Farms policies around animal health?
Specifically, as of that date, I was not a member of the company.
Okay. So you didn't know because you weren't a member of the company, but you also didn't know because you're not an expert in animal health, you're an accountant.
Right.
In fact, you stated that you're not qualified to testify about Foster Farms policies and procedures from 2021, correct?
Policies and procedures as they relate to the transportation,
For example,
resolution.
regarding animal health and disease,
Animal health and disease, that's correct.
or any policies and procedures, in fact. You stated that in a conversation with the prosecution.
I can answer questions around my current understanding of the policies and procedures as they existed at that time, specifically related to the questions around valuation that we've discussed.
Let me do a better job asking that question. Do you recall having a conversation with the prosecution on March 2nd, 2023?
Yes,
Do you have knowledge that the conversation was recorded and provided to us in mandatory discovery?
no,
Okay. So what I'm asking you is, in that conversation, did you state to the prosecution that you're not qualified to comment on Foster Farms policies and procedures in 2021? Do you recall saying that to the prosecution? I can give you the exact quote if it would help.
okay.
Despite the fact that based on everything you know, do you feel qualified to testify about Foster Farms policies and procedures in 2021? Answer, I would have to say, given my short tenure here, no. I just, given my tenure here and exposure to the policies and procedures that existed in place at the time, in September of 2021, I honestly have to say, probably not. Do you recall saying that?
Yes,
Okay. So again, you've stated in the past you are not qualified to testify about Foster Farms policies and procedures in 2021. And that would especially be the case, well, actually, can you answer verbally?
Yes,
And that would especially be the case in a domain that's not even your domain,
That's
animal health and
correct.
disease.
yes, sir.
Thank you. I think you've already stated this as well, but in that conversation with the prosecution on March 2nd, you also stated that the laws and regulations relating to rendering are beyond your expertise, aren't they?
That is correct.
Because you don't deal with rendering.
That is correct.
You're not a veterinarian.
Yes, sir.
You don't know what sort of diseases or risks are posed by putting animals with particular sicknesses in the rendering process, do you?
That is correct. I've stated that I'm not a rendering expert.
Great, thank you. You never saw the two animals at issue in this case, did you?
No, sir.
And even if you did see them, you wouldn't have the qualifications to determine whether they had a disease that meant they were prohibited from being transported.
That is correct.
Even more reason to trust the veterinarian, right?
That is correct.
And especially maybe a veterinarian, whether at Foster Farms or elsewhere, who actually did inspect the animals at issue.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. You previously testified that Foster Farms is concerned about food safety. It's part of your business.
Yes,
Correct. Okay. And that's presumably because it's a big deal if somebody gets sick from the Foster Farms product.
yes,
And it'd be a big deal if animals got sick, in pet food, for example.
yes,
And the rendering process goes to pet food, among other things, correct?
Objection outside scope.
Overruled.
The rendering process, it goes to pet food, among other things, correct?
that's my understanding. But once again, I'm not a rendering expert.
And it doesn't pay for the company to make human beings sick. That's why you're concerned about food safety.
We have a very thorough and robust food safety and quality assurance program that's
Yeah.
specifically put in place to ensure the safety of the products that we sell to the consumers.
Ensure the chickens don't have diseases that are potentially infectious to human beings, right? That's important to you.
I think there's an extensive list of the various reasons that we have a food safety and quality assurance.
And it would do a lot of damage to the company if there were a chicken with a disease infectious to human beings.
Yes,
And you wouldn't want people to know about that, would you?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
Foster Farms products have made people sick in the past, haven't they?
Objection, beyond scope.
Sustained.
So I think you testified you're a vice president of the company, is that correct? And
Yes,
it's,
sir.
I'm sorry if I get this slightly incorrect, but I think it was vice president of general and strategic accounting, is that correct?
operational,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Operational strategic accounting. And means you're not a president, but a step below, a vice president, so an officer, an executive of the company. Is that
That's
correct
correct.
characterization? Okay. And as a senior executive, like our vice president, have you ever heard of another senior executive being involved in a petty theft case?
Objection outside scope. Open
Sustained.
relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may I approach? Mr. Sutton, I just have one last line of inquiry. I'm sorry, Shane, I think that
Yes,
was your
sir.
preference. I previously referred to meetings you had with the prosecution, including a meeting on March 2nd, 2023. Do you recall that meeting?
Yes, sir.
In that meeting, you and your attorneys met with the prosecution about this case, correct?
That's correct.
And is it fair to say your attorneys in that meeting instructed you on how to answer some of the questions about rendering and value in this case?
No, I think I may have, through the course of that, I may have asked a clarifying question, and simply because I'm kind of new to this whole process.
Okay.
But my attorney didn't instruct me on how to answer the question.
Okay, I'm just going to remind you that you're under oath.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to read from you a document. So just do you recall this question being asked of you? What value to Foster Farms, if any, is a chicken that cannot be found to be a slaughter bird for food? And the answer is, okay, so I guess I can take a moment and ask Michael, you know the information I provided you earlier today. Do we want to defer to that, or should we utilize the preliminary information that we had put together? And Michael is your attorney, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when I asked you, did you ask Michael what answer you should give to the questions today? I'm going to ask you again. Did you ask Michael how you should answer the questions given today?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
I
And
guess I
then
was just
Michael,
trying to
sorry, please.
get clarification on how the best way to provide the
Okay.
clarity.
But Michael actually gave you a very specific numerical answer, didn't he?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustain.
Did Michael give you an answer? Now, don't give me the content of the answer, but
Yes.
so when you asked him, can I take a moment and ask Michael to the prosecution's question about the value of the birds, he did give you an answer, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
Nothing further from the people.
Okay.
Your Honor, I have a
Yes, I'm sorry.
brief
Go ahead.
cross-examination. Good afternoon, Mr. Sutton. So you're an accountant at Foster Farms, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're not a vet.
That's correct.
You're not an epidemiologist.
That is correct.
An epidemiologist is someone who sort of studies diseases and things like that, correct?
Correct.
And you wouldn't be qualified to opine on specific diseases an animal might have, right?
That is correct.
You wouldn't be qualified to opine on the transmission or the risk of specific diseases, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, if you wanted to find out about whether an animal is sick or has diseases, you would go to a vet, correct?
That's correct.
Because a vet is going to be the expert to answer that question.
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
No.
I'm sorry.
No redirect from the people.
Okay. Mr. Sutton, the jury has a question. What is meat and feather meal used for? And the second part of that is who consumes it?
My understanding is that's used for the pet food industry.
And in terms of who consumes it, then there would be other animals who consume it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. May the witness be excused?
People excuse the witness.
All right, sir, thank you. You are excused. You're released from the subpoena.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does prosecution have any other rebuttal witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Defense have any serve rebuttal witnesses?
Your Honor, may I have a moment? The defense would like to call Dr. Rosenberg back in serve rebuttal. Please.
All right, you may call her.
You as a veterinarian are familiar with the concept of rendering.
Yes,
And does the rendering process leave the carcasses, corpses, and parts of animals inert? In other words, unable to spread pathogens to other animals and human beings?
there are a lot of concerns about the rendering process. There have been papers written about it. I've spoken with former USDA chief veterinarians about it. And the rendering process is highly imperfect, and so there's a large chance that microorganisms could survive the process and go on to infect other animals or even humans.
And as a veterinarian, I think I asked this before, but just to refresh the jury's memory, and actually, you should direct your answers to the jury as usual, not towards me. You're an expert in determining when animals can be transported and when they cannot, correct? As a veterinarian, this is part of your practice?
Yes, it
And-
is.
And which animals need to be quarantined because they're too sick to even be near other animals, much less near human beings.
Right.
So in your experience with your expertise of both veterinary protocol and relevant regulations, are sick birds allowed to be on slaughter trucks?
No, it's a violation of federal law to have sick birds on slaughter trucks.
And can the presence of a sick bird on a slaughter truck spread disease?
Objection beyond the scope at this point.
Sustained.
Can the presence of a sick bird in the rendering process spread disease?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been actual outbreaks associated with diseased animals being put through rendering, and then there are, like, for example, salmonella in the pet food that people are feeding their pets, and we have animals dying and getting very sick. And there have even been human infections associated with this process.
And you previously testified that sick birds shouldn't even be on slaughter trucks. What is your basis for believing that?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
Sustained.
What is the basis for your belief that sick birds, it's inappropriate for them to be used for rendering?
The problem is that just one sick bird can spread disease to all of the other birds in any location. And so, I mean, we don't want sick birds going into slaughterhouses because then you have a huge risk of contamination or adulteration of the healthy birds that are going through slaughter. There's a lot of mixing of fluids and things through the slaughter process, and you can have these highly infectious organisms spreading from the sick chickens to the healthy ones, and then going on to be part of the food system and, you know, in the grocery store and restaurants and things like that.
You just mentioned the term adulteration. Could you just briefly describe what adulteration means?
Adulteration is when the bird is in some way sick or diseased or dying or unwholesome or insanitary, and it's unlawful for that bird to become part of the food supply.
And is it a violation of veterinary protocols and regulations to transport adulterated poultry products, even for rendering purposes?
Objection, beyond the
Absolutely.
scope.
No further questions, Your Honor.
So, is it fair to say, Doctor, that you disagree with the rendering process? You think it poses risks? Is that a fair statement?
I think not the idea of rendering per se, but I just think it needs to be done in a much safer way. There are no testing procedures in place to be sure that we're not getting microorganisms into our pet food and things, and so it's extremely dangerous as it's being done today.
So it's fair to say that you want the laws changed in that regard?
Your Honor, that's,
Uh,
this states his testimony.
Directly responsive, Your Honor. Fair question.
Overruled.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so
Well, you were talking about regulations, so the way
Right.
rendering is currently done, is it fair to say you want it done in a different way? And it's if true.
I think that there needs to be a lot more oversight into the process and testing
Okay.
so that we can be sure that it's safe for consumers.
So you want it to be done in a different way than it's done now?
Right.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Counsel approach. By the jury, but at least from the jury, the court is not going to permit the witness to ask this question for legal reasons. All right, may the witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right,
Yes, Your Honor.
okay. Ma'am, Dr. Rosenberg, thank you very much. You are excused. Defense have any other rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that concludes the evidence phase. of this trial. What comes next is the arguments, closing arguments of counsel and the court giving the jury instruction for you. Now, the counsel and I are going to spend a good chunk of the day to discuss the jury instructions, which is the law in this case. And so we need to settle that issue, and the court will give you, once that's issued, the court, and that issue is settled, the court will read to you the jury instructions just as the court did during before opening statements. And that'll be read to you before closing arguments. And so today we're not going to have enough time to do that and also present closing arguments. I'm going to recess you for the day and ask you to come back to court. We're going to resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock with jury instruction and closing arguments tomorrow. Okay, so again, we're not done yet. So even though you've heard the evidence, all the evidence in the case, you need to wait until you hear the jury instructions of the court, as well as closing arguments, before you make up your mind, and also before you talk to the other jurors during deliberations to come to a decision. So do not prejudge the case at this point. Do not talk to anyone. Do not conduct any research in this case. All right, I'm going to go ahead and excuse you for the day, and I'll see you here tomorrow. All right, also presence of the jury. Counsel, the court has received the people's proposed jury instructions and proposed jury instructions from Ms. Santurio's counsel, Mr. Little. I don't recall seeing any from you, Mr. Shaw. Are you joined by?
Yeah, I filed a general joinder, so anything they file, I'm by default joining in.
All right.
Mr. Little provided the instructions for the entire stuff.
Okay.
Your Honor, I was actually hoping if we could take a 15-minute break.
Yeah, I was
Instructions
just
were-
gonna
Thanks.
suggest that. I'm gonna go grab those. Let's take a 15-minute recess. We'll come back and we'll discuss those issues.
Thank you.